Hello, I'm Dr. Benjamin Miller from the Department of Writing Studies at the University of Sydney. This video defines the branches of rhetoric, adds some scholarly complexity to a discussion of the branches of rhetoric, and helps you think of ways that you can use the branches of rhetoric in a rhetorical analysis. So briefly, we'll be defining the branches of rhetoric. We'll be looking at a scholarly article about the branches of rhetoric, and we'll consider how to find the telos, and this is a complex rhetorical term, how to find the telos or the main objective within a text that you're analysing. So there are three branches of rhetoric according to Aristotle, and each branch refers to a type of speech or a type of argument that occurs in everyday speech. Firstly, there is deliberative rhetoric, which basically refers to arguments to do with the future. Secondly, there is forensic rhetoric, sometimes called judicial rhetoric, which refers to arguments relating to the past. And thirdly, there is epideictic rhetoric, sometimes called ceremonial rhetoric, which refers to things occurring at the present moment. Whether or not you've heard these technical terms, I'm sure you've experienced an argument where someone has tried to convince you about something to do with the future, the past, or the present. And so you've all heard an argument before or read an argument before that could be classified as being within one of these branches of rhetoric. Now, according to Aristotle, you could determine whether a speech was within one of these branches of rhetoric by looking at the method that speech uses, the main question that speech or that argument pursues, and the time to which the argument refers. So Aristotle asks us to examine the method of a speech, the main question of a speech, and the time to which a speech refers in order to associate it with a particular branch of rhetoric. With deliberative rhetoric, he says deliberative advice is either exhortation or dissuasion. And what he means by this is that a piece of rhetoric or an argument that is deliberative will either provide all the benefits for a particular course of action or examine the reasons that course of action should not be taken. So we should exhort or hold up on high a certain course of action, or we should dissuade people from undertaking that course of action. The main question that deliberative rhetoric addresses is whether a course of action is advantageous or harmful. So you can imagine a deliberative argument is concerned with the potential outcomes of following a particular course of action. And so the main time that a deliberative example of rhetoric refers to is the future. It advises an audience about certain future events and courses of action to take to negotiate those future events. Forensic rhetoric for Aristotle refers to legal arguments mainly, and so he describes the method as referring to arguments that occur in the law courts, where there is either accusation or defense. You can imagine someone accusing someone else that they have acted or behaved in a certain way or undertaken a certain action, and someone would then need to defend themselves about whether or not they did actually behave in that way or whether they acted in the way that someone has described them as acting. Therefore, the main question that arises in forensic rhetoric is how something occurred, what actually occurred, and whether the consequence of someone's actions are just or unjust. So you get a sense from all of this that the main time to which a forensic argument refers is the past, what has been done and what occurred in the past. Epideictic rhetoric refers to arguments that occur in the present regarding existing qualities. Because it refers to present people or situations or activities or events, The main method for an epidictic speech is either praise or blame, whether something is worthy of honour or worthy of disgrace. So epidictic rhetoric refers to things that are occurring at the present time. So as a quick summary, you can see that deliberative rhetoric provides advice about whether a future course of action is advantageous or harmful. Forensic rhetoric accuses or defends against a certain version of past events. And epidictic rhetoric either praises or blames someone or something, saying whether it's worthy of honour or disgrace in the present time. So now we have a basic definition of the branches of rhetoric. It's important in scholarly conversations to complicate that understanding, to add some kind of interesting angle to it. And certainly with the branches of rhetoric, it's no different. It would be nice if every single text or argument or speech could be neatly assigned into one or other of the branches of rhetoric. But what you will find if you start to do an analysis of any particular argument is that it's a much messier situation than that. In fact, you'll find arguments that employ all three of the different methods or three of the different sets of questions and refer to past, present, and future within the same argument or text. In her article, The Rhetoric of Exorcism, Hilary Kallendorf describes how exorcism handbooks from the 1500s and 1600s utilised all three of the branches of rhetoric. It's a particularly interesting article because at the time that these exorcism handbooks were being published, the church openly attacked studies of rhetoric or the teaching of rhetoric, describing it as heretical and sacrilegious, that it's an affront to God to study rhetoric. But Kallendorf's argument actually uncovers the fact that many of the priests writing Christian textbooks were very well trained in rhetoric, and many of the Christian ceremonies and rituals employed rhetorical strategies. So looking at the actual event of an exorcism, which is where a priest might come in to try and address the demonic possession of a parishioner, Kallendorf looks at the textbooks that were published about such exorcisms, and she finds that the act of exorcism incorporates all three branches of classical rhetoric. Judicial, where the priest would accuse the demon in possession of someone's body for the actions that person has undertaken. There was deliberative rhetoric, where the priest would ask the demon to depart the body, so the future act of leaving the body and leaving the person alone. And there was ceremonial or epidictic rhetoric in the sense that the priest would praise the power of God or blame Satan for taking possession of this human soul. So Kallendorf examines many textbooks that train priests on exorcism and finds that these three branches are apparent in all types of exorcism ceremony. This leads to the question of whether or not a particular argument or speech can be easily assigned to one or other of the branches of rhetoric. What I think you'll find is that it's very difficult to analyse a text and conclude that it uses strategies from just one particular branch of rhetoric. In fact, you'll find arguments that employ strategies from all three of the branches of rhetoric. This is nothing new. Aristotle knew this when he wrote his original textbook on rhetoric, and he gave the following advice, that each type of speech can in fact use the different branches, But the end, or the telos was the word that Aristotle used, which has been interpreted as the main objective or the final objective of a speech. The end, or the telos, of each style of speech is different, and there are 3 ends for the 3 branches. So, if you're analysing a text, you may find that it uses strategies from all 3 of the branches of rhetoric. It might refer to the past, the present, and the future. But as an analyst of that text, your goal is to figure out what the main objective or the main goal of that text is, and determine through that which branch of rhetoric it ultimately belongs to. So for some final remarks on how to use the branches of rhetoric in an analysis of a text, you should be aware that a text might utilize methods and questions from any of the branches of rhetoric, that a good scholarly analysis of a speech using the concept of the branches of rhetoric will actually point out this complexity of how difficult it is to assign a text or an argument to one particular branch of rhetoric. But ultimately, your analysis will identify the telos, or the final objective of a particular argument, and categorize it as deliberative, forensic, or epideictic based on what the final objective of that text or argument is. So that's it for today's video. I hope you've found this discussion interesting, and that it'll be helpful if you're considering referring to the branches of rhetoric in an analysis of an argument for this course.